Greetings, everyone. Today is Monday, September 7th, and here is today's Monday Morning Minute. So, for today, first I'd like to talk about just some final thoughts, thinking about last week's class and some of the themes that we discussed, and also thinking about our class topic of assessment. Then we'll move on to talking about this week's readings. I just want to say a few introductory words to you all. I also want to call attention to an upcoming project that we have. It's called the Teaching Metaphor Project. We'll go into more depth about that. And then this week we have our very first critical response. So I'll explain what I'm looking for there and how to successfully complete this response. Okay, so we did a lot of work with wicked questions last week, and let me just say it was so wonderful to spend time with you all synchronously. I'm so looking forward to our next class in October, and thank you all for being so present and willing to engage. And in thinking about those wicked questions that we identified and worked hard to articulate well, here's one that's very clunkily articulated, but I think is one that I'm left with as we approach the rest of the semester. And it is, how is it that we need assessments to ensure students are learning, and we need to approach assessments critically simultaneously? So assessment, in my mind at least, occupies this tenuous space between being completely necessary and part of our role as teachers, but then also being somewhat suspect, or at least something that we need to view critically, that we need to constantly re-examine, whether it's an assessment that we're creating or one that has been created for us and we need to administer to our students. So I want us to kind of rest in that tense space for the rest of the semester, thinking both about why it's necessary and also how to ensure that the assessments that we're giving to our students, especially the ones that we have control over, are culturally responsive. Okay, and moving in and thinking about those themes of culturally responsive pedagogy and assessment, we have one assigned reading this week. It's from Lisa Delpit. Maybe some of you have read this before. It's a pretty popular, famous piece. There's not a lot of fame in academia, but I'd say Lisa Delpit, along with Gloria Ladson-Billings, has achieved that. And this piece is from a book called Other People's Children, and it's called The Silenced Dialogue, originally published in the Harvard Educational Review in 1988. So it is a bit dated, but I think you'll find that a lot of the ideas that she's sharing, they were provocative then. I'd say they're still provocative today in a lot of different ways. And the main thrust of this piece is her definition of what she calls the culture of power, and how important it is, from her view, that we ensure students understand this culture of power, that we tell them that there is this culture of power, and here are the specific ways that you can navigate it, and calling those out by name. And I think she gives some really powerful examples. As I said, it was provocative then, it's provocative now. Perhaps we might see ourselves in some of the non-examples or counter-examples that she gives us. And I think that's okay, right? That, again, it kind of goes back to tension, and tension being really productive in our growth as teachers. And then the other point that I wanted to talk to you about with regard to this piece is that she's coming at this thinking about the teaching of writing. And so I know not all of us are writing teachers, but I do think that the core of her argument holds across discipline. So I'm asking you to contend with this question of, what are those codes of power within this culture of power within your own discipline? How does power function within your own discipline? That's maybe something to keep in mind as you read through this piece. Okay, now I'm going to navigate away from the slideshow to talk a little bit about this teaching metaphor project. It's not due for a couple of weeks, I think 3 weeks, so Sunday the 27th. And you can find information about this within our Blackboard course. You can go to the assignments tab. If you go to our syllabus and you're kind of following along with our syllabus, there are some hyperlinks once we scroll down all the way. Here we go. Okay, I've linked to it here as well. So something else I forgot to mention that I'm thinking of as I'm looking at this syllabus is that I have divided up our course into several modules. And the first that we are in right now is one entitled Why Assessment. I was trying to think about the order and an order that made sense. And for me, the question of why always precedes the question of what. And that's how I've organized this class as well. So we're thinking about why we need assessment. Why is it important, at least in some forms, right? And so I think maybe that's another helpful sort of heuristic to keep in mind as we move through this particular module. And I think it also has implications for the project that you create for this teaching metaphor project, our first big assignment. Okay, so the inspiration for this project comes from the field of conceptual linguistics. It's a lot of really interesting stuff, but a foundational piece is by Lakoff and Johnson in 1980. They wrote a book called Metaphors We Live By. And the basic contention here is that metaphors are not just, rhetorical flourishes that we encounter in poetry. We use metaphors all of the time in our language. And those metaphors are actually really important. They tell us about how we see the world, how we see our place within the world. So a common metaphor, for instance, that we talk about all the time without realizing it is this one of time is money. We talk about spending time, right? And time is like a valuable resource like money. So anyway, there are lots and lots, and maybe I can share the Lakoff and Johnson piece with you all if you're interested. But the idea here is to be intentional. So rather than sort of unconsciously adopting metaphors for teaching and learning that may not be very helpful, that may not position ourselves as teachers and our students in positive ways, I want us to kind of get in front of that and to think about metaphors, to construct consciously a metaphor for ourselves for teaching and learning. And that's what I've written here. So your task is to come up with a metaphor that espouses your own view of teaching and learning. I want you to think about this. I want you to kind of let it simmer for a while, which is why we're talking about it several weeks in advance. And then you're going to reflect on these questions here. So does your metaphor frame teaching and learning positively or negatively? How are you positioned as the teacher? How are your students positioned? Within this metaphor, do they have agency, or are they simply beings having education done to them? Are they active? Are they passive? What does this metaphor suggest about how you might approach conflicts in the classroom? Ones related to students, perhaps colleagues, perhaps families. What does this metaphor suggest about how to ascertain whether students are meeting their goals? How will you measure success and growth? And what does your metaphor suggest is the goal of education? So further down this assignment description, I'm providing you here with sort of a counter example. So one metaphor that I've heard some teachers talk about, and maybe you've heard it as well, is this idea that, and again, it's very subconscious, but that teaching is putting out fires. You might have heard that phrase before. Oh yeah, it's putting out fires. And if that's somebody's metaphor, perhaps unconsciously, then that really frames the way that they approach the classroom and all aspects therein, right? So as I write here, this has a negative connotation. The teacher is the one in charge. Students are kind of the problem, right? They're the ones that are in need of stifling in some way. It suggests that the goal of education is just to keep things under control. And that's not super hopeful. It's not sustainable as a teacher if you view going to work every single day as just managing crises. That's not sustainable, right? You're not going to be in the classroom for very long if that's your frame. So find something that's not that. And it can be, of course, absolutely anything. And I would give examples, except I just don't want you to be boxed in by what previous people have done. I really would love to know. But that said, if you're somebody who really needs an example, reach out to me and I would be happy to share. As you may or may not know from your interactions with students, often the example that's given or the modeling that's given is what sort of what colors sort of the rest of students' expectations and responses. So I don't want to, again, box you guys in. Okay, And what I'm asking you to do with this metaphor is to create a visual essay that explains that metaphor. So this visual essay can take a lot of different forms. If you simply want to write your essay in a like a word processing software, that's fine. Just like include some images. Cool. If you want to make it primarily visual, you're also welcome to use VoiceThread or PowerPoint or Prezi. You can narrate over them. And again, the visual element here is meant to enhance our understanding of your metaphor and your thinking about your metaphor. So the basic requirements are that it's 500 to 750 words in length, or roughly the equivalent if you're narrating over a VoiceThread or Prezi, let's say. Again, include at least a couple of images that illustrate that chosen metaphor, that help us access your thinking in a multimodal way. And then make sure to address all of the prompts. These are just the same as what was above. Again, these are the questions I'd like you to respond to. And then finally, please do incorporate 3 to 5 readings, concepts from our course. And if you're writing it in an essay format, traditional essay format, please use in-text citations. If you're narrating, please call out specific authors and concepts so I know that you're thinking about what we've been talking about and really integrating it into this project. I've included a hyperlink here. If APA is something that's new to you, cool, that's fine. It's just what the social sciences use. And this will take you to the Purdue OWL website where you can find a lot of just basic information about APA. Here's the grading sheet, pretty standard. Just note that, as I think I mentioned in our first video, and as you can see throughout the syllabus, I build in timeliness into the rubric. So if you do not submit it on time and we don't have a prior arrangement around that, then you lose 4 points, which is equivalent to 20% of the entire assignment. Just something to note. Okay, so this week I'm asking you to look more closely at this assignment description, and of course, let me know if you have any questions. Okay, back to our slideshow. Okay, and then finally, this week we are doing our first critical response. And the way that the timing works, well, it's intentional, but it is going to be maybe a little funky since our class when we meet is on Tuesday. For our critical response weeks, what I'm asking you to do is to initially post your response by 11:59 p.m. on Thursday. And then between Thursday and Sunday at 11:59 p.m., I want you to respond to at least 2 of your colleagues. You're all in small groups, and I'll go through that in just a second, but that's the basic timeline. And the reason I've done that is because if you're somebody who typically does all of your coursework Monday to Friday, and maybe weekends are for family or weekends are for work or whatever it is, you can still complete this within the weekend, within the Monday through Friday work week. You would simply post by Thursday, everyone else is posting by Thursday, go back in on Friday and make those follow-up posts. However, if you're somebody who really needs the weekend in terms of getting caught up, in terms of completing schoolwork, because perhaps you have family obligations or you have work throughout the week, then you still have until Sunday, the whole weekend, to get those follow-up responses done. And that's just kind of the thinking behind it. And if it doesn't work for you, please let me know. We're all trying to figure things out this semester, and I'm trying to be as flexible as possible. But for this very first critical response, thinking again about this question of like, why assessment? I would like you to respond to these prompts. First of all, what are the connections you're seeing between the themes in our readings thus far? So we've had Delpit, the Ladson Billing piece, and America's Report Card. So the connections between those readings and classroom assessment. And then secondly, how might assessment fit into concepts like Ladson Billing's education debt or Delpit's culture of power? So this is kind of a connect the dot prompt. Where are you seeing these kind of overlaps, and how does assessment fit into these? So that's what I'm asking you to reflect on, and let me show you now where to go to do that. So here is our wonderful Blackboard course. Maybe I can make it a little bigger. Okay, so from the home page, you can use this left-hand toolbar, sidebar, and just simply click on critical response groups. and you will be shuffled automatically into your randomly assigned, I might add, critical response small group. So you'll only have one option here, whereas I have two. You'll then enter your critical response sort of homepage and navigate down to group discussion board. And here are all the critical response forums. So you'll simply click on the critical response number 1 forum. Oh yeah, Blackboard is weird. Once you get in there, you can't actually see the prompts. But when you go to create a thread, you can. So, and here are the prompts I've just introduced. They're there as well for your reference. And then here are the requirements. Here's the basic rubric. Please do make sure that you engage with the text specifically. This is kind of a community forum, a discussion forum for us to really contend with the nuances of the arguments that we're reading. So please do engage with texts. Please make connections to our course. Please also be sure to contribute in a timely fashion. So even though this is asynchronous, there are still those deadlines that are built in to help us really still be, contending with each other's ideas, even if it's not at exactly the same time. All right, I think that's all I have for you this week. But of course, let me know if there are questions, comments, concerns. I hope you all had a nice weekend and you're ready for a 4-day week. Those are always the best. All right, everyone, take care.